Benny Goodman and his music.
Good evening, everybody. Well, for everybody to get online while I get everything in order here. And Chris, it is, isn't it? Today is Thursday? Yes. Okay. Scared me there. I'm losing track completely. Hey, Martin. Hey, Sue and Timothy. Hey, Christy. I'm looking into those cases, but it's tricky. They're pretty common names. If I had an address or something, that would help a bit more. Hey, Betsy.
Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, the man with the torrid clarinet
Address besides
and
the
even more
Jolie, yeah,
torrid
one.
band who purveys assorted rhythms, all danceable.
Hey, Renee.
The urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago. And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's
Hey,
greatest
Vicky.
hits, Blue Skies.
You got Miles right here. Ah. Hey, Jim. Hey, Evelyn. Hey, Larry. Oh, yeah. Wrong button. Okay. Ah, thank you for that. Hey, Elizabeth. Hey, Cheryl. David, Chandra, Karen, Jordana. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Kathleen. I've taught Miles to come play when I get the computer out, so that's on me. Hey, Leah. Hey, Diane. Hey, Lori. Hey, Sandy. Hey, Georgia, Ann, Trish, Teresa over on Twitch. Anybody I might have missed? Hey, Dakota. Hey, Ashley. Hey, Brooklyn. And Gregory. Brooklyn's dad. Hey, Nancy. Miles. Dude just jumped off of a chair on wheels. Now, Christy, assuming that's really her. I don't know if she's the only May Hughes hanging around. Hey, Timberly. Yep, it's Passover time. Hey, Ann. I don't think I have any dirt on Eloise Burns, but I can look if you want. Hey, Marie and Marita, Christine, Lemond, Doreen. Hey, everybody. Decided I'd just polish off this bottle of Buffalo Trace, so I've got a much more full glass than I normally do. Hey, Katie and Christy. And Casey. Richard, that sounds good. It sounds like cavities, but Kathy, congrats. Kinda want mine. Hey, Dawn. Hey, Sharon. Hey, Bob. Miles always picks this time to be cuddly, never when I'm just watching TV or something. Miles, are you making a mess? Is that what you're doing? See if you can find my allergy medicine while you're at it.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Howdy, Michelle. Here it was snowing in Seattle, too. Hey, Emily and Aviva. Hey, Dad. I'm not going to drink all of this over the course of it. Probably just leave it sitting out overnight. Have it for breakfast. snowing pollen. You keep that. Haven't heard anything new about Bella yet. No, Miles is just being cuddly up here on the desk. He's pretty well trained to show up when the Benny Goodman starts. Little snaggletooth. Hey, Janice in Lockport. We just found out that Christy Hughes' grandmother is buried in Lockport. So I was just looking how far that is a trip from here. Hey, Octavio. Hey, Dina. Hey, Jean. Bridget and Marie. Oh, there's a baby Ambrose. All right, congrats to Bella. Still say it should have been Cornelius, but... Congrats to Bella and baby Ambrose. That's a pretty good one, too. Evening, Julianne. Hey, Chris. I do have some news, though. You might have already seen the post, but the government has approved the request for a gravestone for William Randall of the 29th USCT. That was United States Colored Troops. One of a few black Civil War vets that I know of at Graceland. He's unmarked, but we're getting him a marker. Should be in 6 to 8 weeks. Graceland is even going to waive the setting fee. I'll hope to keep you posted. Maybe we'll have a little ceremony or something. I need some Flonase right now. I got a thing of it someplace, but this time of year when I'm in and out of the road all the time, the toiletries and the medicines are in the backpack, and then they're on the counter, and then they're in the backpack. I don't know where they are.
Goodman goes away back and gets a lot of...
I'm surprised they got it this quickly. The government emailed me this morning saying they needed some contemporary documentation that he was buried there. Like not a find a grave page or something like an obituary or cemetery paperwork from when he died. Luckily, I had the lot record scanned. Hey, Grandma. And they said that was sufficient. It'll be open. They just might not have the front entrance open, and they may not be allowing tours. We'll see. Happy birthday, Eleanor. Hey, Lori. Hey, Belinda. Carol, Ronnie doesn't start grad school for quite a while yet, but she's gotten accepted to it. I don't think she starts till 2023. Hey, Kendra. Hey, Kimberly. Thursdays aren't the same, but next Thursday I'm on the road, so... Hey, Dave. Hey, Michelle. Yippee Skippy. That's a good Miss Piggy line. Baby Piggy, anyway. Hey, Ashley. Hey, Sheila. Sue Ronnie's getting her master's in writing for children and teens. And Kristen, yeah, I'll be in New York this time next week. But I think the group is back in the hotel. at like 8 o'clock, and it'll be 9 o'clock Eastern time. So theoretically, I could pop on and do a tour. So it's going to be one of those mystery nights. Hey, Eileen. Hey, Dana. Hey, Diane. We'll give Benny another song. And then get going. Hey, Kathy. Miles. What are you yelling for? Just attention. Hey, Steve. All kinds of things are shaking. Always are. Hey, Joanne and Kathleen. Evening in. Hey, Kate. Hey, Kelly. This is gonna be a very easy herding day, though. We just got a couple of things. Well, we'll see. I mean, otherwise, I'm just sitting in the hotel room by myself. Sitting in the hotel room by myself. All right, that's Benny wrapping it up. Hey, Molly, welcome.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now, Benny Goodman's arrangement of The Bugle Call Rang.
All right, that is Benny Goodman wrapping it up live from the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. That means it is time for me to get started. Forgot to push the wrong button there. All right, welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. Got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book. H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City, Devil, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, Murder Maps USA, brand new from Thames and Hudson, and coming this summer, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, and it's already going to be out of date because I say William Randall of the 29th USCT, one of the few black Civil War veterans there, has a soon-to-be marked grave. By this time, it looks like it will in fact be a marked grave. I'll keep everybody posted on that. So welcome along, everybody. This is one of the tours that I do both ways. I do it both as a virtual tour and as an in-person tour. I thought about doing it this weekend, but you know what? It's going to be cold this weekend. So this weekend, we're just going to do a quick gangster tour, and that's about it. There's just so much going on this week. Passover and taxes the same week. That's an oy vey if I ever heard one. So, all right, ladies and gents. Well, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go to the Prairie Avenue Millionaires District. Back in the late 19th century, this is where all the robber barons and a whole crowd of strangers and eccentrics lived. So we'll just show where this is really quick. This is the Loop, main downtown area. Just a little ways south of there, just south of the noise and the bustle, is this section of South Prairie Avenue, stretching from about 18th down to down to about Cermak, 22nd. Though it was generally said that nobody went past 21st back in those days. So this is kind of the route that we're going to be taking. The loop we'll be walking around to get just to get your bearings here. But to start with, we're going to start off a little bit off of Prairie Avenue. Just over around the corner on Indiana Street. Or not Indiana Street, whatever this one is. and to talk a little bit about Battle of Fort Dearborn Park. Now, the Battle of Fort Dearborn was part of the War of 1812. It became known that the British were marching on Chicago. Orders came in from General Hull to evacuate everybody. They promised the Potawatomi that if you accompany us, we'll give you all of our guns and all of our whiskey. And then they decided, no, maybe that wasn't a good idea, so they threw the guns in the well and threw the whiskey in the river. By a couple of accounts, for a couple of days, all of the drinking water tasted rather groggy. But this was not a very good idea. The Potawatomi were apparently already working for the British, so they got down, marched them from the loop down to about right here, and this is where the attack began. They used to call it the Fort Dearborn Massacre. We now consider it as more correct to say the Battle of Fort Dearborn, but technically it wasn't a very long battle. It's very difficult to get your bearings as to exactly what happened or even where it happened. There are a number of first-hand accounts, but it's one of those things where every first-hand account, the person telling it has to make themselves into Indiana Jones. In any case, it was a quick battle. A number of the settlers and soldiers were killed. The rest were sold as slaves to the British, who to their credit promptly let them go. But about as near as we can triangulate, it would have happened right around this general vicinity. Now, I say it right around this general vicinity because other people say it might have happened as much as 6 blocks north of here. But, it was a battle. It didn't take place in 10 square feet. We're just gonna stop in there really briefly. I know people come on this one looking for mansions, and we got those too. But we're gonna start out, in fact, down the road from there, with a couple of mansions that don't happen to be there anymore. Now, most of the old-time mansions were lost in the early 20th century after anything Victorian went completely out of fashion. But down this block over here, just a little bit north of 18th Street, there are a couple of notable things. One, a little bit further down, about behind the tree, about where that turret is, would have been the home of Wirt Dexter and his daughter Catherine Dexter McCormick. As a young woman, Catherine Dexter enrolled at MIT. She was one of the first women to do so, and not the very first, but among the first. As a young woman, she'd been a part of Chicago high society, but was more interested in going around looking for relics of the Battle of Fort Dearborn. After MIT, she married Stanley McCormick, who spent most of his life in an asylum. After his death, she used most of his money to, well, not most of it, but almost single-handedly funded the research behind the first birth control pill. Those who knew she had married into the McCormicks did not find this controversial. The McCormicks were nuts. Well, Arthur Meeker, who lived a few blocks south, said that they shared a certain not undistinguished goofiness, was his exact quote. We'll just kind of leave it at that. Also, just around the corner from here, they had a little fence. This was called the Massacre Tree. Now, this was a tree that was said to be left over from the Battle of Fort Dearborn and still to bear bullet holes. It was another of those things, though, where some said it was and some said it probably was not. In any case, it eventually fell down and was then donated to the state by a guy who didn't technically own it, but the guy who lived right here on the corner. Now, if you look down the road there, you can see where they used to have the statue commemorating the battle and where the tree was. This was the mansion of George Pullman. Those of you who are longtime viewers around here know that every time I go to this guy's neighborhood or this guy's house or this guy's grave, I seem to have something break or something fall apart. We tend to blame any technical difficulties around here on Old Man Pullman. Old Man Pullman was the owner of the Pullman Palace Car Company, which revolutionized comfort in rail travel. Kind of wish that would come back. His mansion was built for him by Solon Beeman. Solon Beeman also designed the entire town of Pullman, which is now the neighborhood of Pullman, down on the south side. This was a factory town that Pullman built for his workers, including the Hotel Florence right over here. And as factory towns go, it was one of the nicest by far. It's still gorgeous to walk around. But one year he cut everybody's salary by 30%, but didn't lower their rents. This led to huge strikes and damaged his reputation considerably for a long time. Now, he died in 1897, about 3 years after the strike. There was a guy who showed up for the funeral named Ferdinand Frederick Gustav Bering, who showed up insisting that Pullman had been his father all along. He said, I don't want money, I merely want recognition. And this guy had been showing up for a while. Pullman had said, you are a crazy man, get out of here. But he kept on showing up for quite a while. Now, in here, along with Mr. Pullman, lived his family, including his sons, George Pullman Jr. and Sanger Pullman, who by all accounts were absolutely terrible kids. They got kicked out of one school after another. They went to the Harvard School, where Leopold and Loeb eventually went, and got kicked out of one school after another. Nobody could really stand them at any of them. At the time of their father's death, he left them like $3,000 each. One of their fiancées promptly left them over this. They were widely despised. Sanger died in a riding accident in 1905. George had already died of pneumonia a while earlier. Previously, he had stolen his brother's fiancée, but while still carrying on an affair with his own fiancée. There was a lot of stuff that came out around the time saying, let this be a lesson. One night of their carousal cost old man Pullman $18,000, and all that damage was done in one saloon. They must have absolutely wrecked the place. This rich man's son is only one example of the useless lives of young men raised in luxury. And this is about how he looked when he died. He looked like a very sick individual. He probably was. But that building, of course, is now long gone, replaced by these things. So we're going to turn around and check out our first proper mansion of the tour. Go down over here. This is one of my absolute favorites. This is also built by Solon Beeman. This is known as the Kimball House, built in the French chateau style. It was run by an architecture organization in the 1950s. At the time, they let it be known that Al Capone had once tried to buy it. Now, whether that's true or not is very difficult to determine, but the stories can be traced back to the 1950s, which for Capone stories is pretty good. But this was the home of W.W. and Ava Kimball, who were the Kimballs of Kimball Pianos. This is the house that Kimball Pianos built. W.W. Kimball did not really know anything about pianos or organs, but one time he got in a business deal where somebody who couldn't pay him with money paid him with 4 pianos. And he turned right around and sold those at a pretty good profit and decided, hey, I'm in the wrong business. Get me more pianos. That's what he did, and look what it did. His wife, Ava, became a big collector of old masters' paintings. Arthur Meeker Jr. said that she wanted a complete collection, which she thought meant one of each master. Now, Dropbox is doing this thing where it doesn't work with Macs and offline files anymore, so in theory, there should be a picture right here of the Rembrandt that she owned, that she bought for $100,000, Old Man with a Chain. Instead, we'll just move over to here a bit. Just on the other side of it is the coach house, which itself I think is larger than any apartment I ever had. There we go. I've always thought that, this is something you see on their grave as well. I've always kind of thought that the coach house might be meant to subtly evoke the look of piano keys. You can kind of see the black and white and the black and white in there. I love the chimneys on this place. Look at these. Gorgeous. It was referred to in the press when it was built as a cottage, or when Mrs. Campbell was old and living there. At the time, the last couple of years, she had kind of lost her mind and didn't realize that she was surrounded by, even at the time, millions of dollars worth of paintings. We're going to go across the street from here now. And check out the Glessner House, designed by Henry Hobson Richardson. Now, this is the Glessner House built for Mr. Glessner, who was a farm equipment baron. There was a lot of money in farm equipment at the time. And his wife, Frances, who kept a really detailed diary, so we know a lot about what went on in this house over time. This was designed for them by a guy who was a real rock star at the time, Henry Hobson Richardson. Shown here looking like Falstaff. It's an architectural style known as Richardsonian Romanesque. Probably the best example left in the city. He also liked to pose wearing Roman robes. Liked a healthy breeze around his privates, I suppose. He doesn't have too much left in Chicago. He's got a few, there's a lot of things that where Henry Ives Cobb kind of copied him, but not too much really by him except for this and the Potter tomb at Graceland Cemetery. The missing file thing is really killing me today. But this was, the Chicago Daily News at the time it was built said John J. Glessner has moved into his queer-looking mansion, which the great Richardson designed. Taken by the untutored eye for a stable, a factory, or a bowling alley. The architect declared it one of his best works. Personally, not really my style, but it attracted a lot of notice at the time just because it was so different from everything else that was being built at the time. There's also George Glessner. Their kids turned out a lot better than the Pullman kids did, or at least the Pullman sons. This is a photograph of the Massacre Tree that was taken by George Glessner, a son of theirs who was an expert photographer. They also had a daughter named Frances who in her old age developed what was called nutshell studies. It was a landmark in forensics. At the time, detectives were still working on the idea that their job was to get a hunch and then beat people into admitting that their hunch was right. She developed these nutshell studies that recreated crime scenes exactly to help budding detectives learn how to look for clues and solve crimes. A few of them are still extant, and a few of them are even still used occasionally for this kind of teaching. It's kind of a landmark in the development of forensics over the years. Also, they just look so cool. We're going to flip over from here. Yeah, often, in theory, the cops should know better than that now. In practice. But this is the Coleman Ames house. Now, it was almost like the place was cursed. This place was initially built in the late 1880s by Henry Ives Cobb. Now, Henry Ives Cobb built it. He did a lot of stuff that kind of copies the style of Henry Hobson Richardson, stuff like the old Excalibur Club building from back, which was originally the Chicago History Museum. So this place was initially owned by Coleman Ames, but he only lived there for a couple of years. Then a guy named Minor Ames moved in. He was a coal merchant who lived there for 2 years before dying in 1890. Eventually, it was purchased by Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Fish. This is Mrs. Joseph Fish. She was an insurance guy. She was involved in a lot of Jewish civic organizations and high society functions. And they were kind of fascinating to the kids in the neighborhood. I mean, they'd probably heard all kinds of urban legends about Jews. These were the first ones they ever met. Also, they kept pet monkeys. The local kids were absolutely fascinated by that. But then there was this firebug operating in the city named Fanny Korshak. She and her husband David were running an arson ring. David the Torch Korshak. His uncle was later his nephew was later like a big fixer for the mob. But Joseph was accused of being their main agent. When they were arrested, David said, "No, it was all this insurance guy. That insurance company that's been paying us off for setting all of those fires. Joseph Fish of the insurance company has been the one who made sure the payments go through. He told us which buildings we should burn." To kind of hung him up for everything, and Mr. Fish was brought on trial, and the prosecution was just vicious. The prosecuting attorney closed by saying, "I thank God not all men are such miserable scoundrels as Joseph Fish." But in the end, Mr. Fish was acquitted. One of the jurors said, "Well, we just couldn't make hide or tail of the evidence, so we had to rely on just the character of the witnesses." The prosecution's witnesses were all crooks. But meanwhile, Fish had all kinds of respectable people coming up to say that he was, in fact, that he was actually a pretty good guy, not the kind of people who would arrange to burn down houses that had people inside of them. Probably the case. It was a big case for a little while, one of those ones that kind of faded into obscurity over the years. We're going to move down just a little from here. Or are we going across the street? No, we're going down just a little bit. To a house that used to be here. Next one over, you can see, now check out the one on the left here with the arch and the squared turret. You can still see that one and this one. The house next to it to the right was originally built for Joseph Sears, best remembered now for founding the suburb of Kenilworth. But then it was designed by Daniel Burnham, then heavily remodeled when it was bought by the Meeker family. They made it look like this, made it fit in with all of the other stone buildings that were put up at the time. It's Daniel Burnham with me. So this was the home of Arthur and Grace Meeker and their children. That's Grace Meeker on the right and her son Arthur Meeker Jr. over on the left. We've got quite a lot of stuff about the Meekers. Arthur Meeker grew up to be a travel writer and also a novelist. He wrote a whole novel about life on Prairie Avenue. He was born at the tail end of the Gilded Age and kind of saw all of this stuff from a certain aloof detachment. So it makes him a very amusing source. When talking about like Victorian architecture, he would say things like, "It must be admitted that at the time of the Victorians, taste was at an all-time low. He would describe these mansions and say, the man who built this one had no more of it than anybody else. His writing is always kind of charming and delightful. This is Prairie Avenue, one of the books that he wrote. And from here, let's make our way across the street. All right, this bourbon's kind of knocking me out tonight. I'm going to take off the jacket. I'm getting really hot in here. As we look across the street to what is presently a park. And formerly there was a house right over here, the Osborne Keith House, designed by Henry Ives Cobb, once again. But this is generally agreed to be the oldest house still standing in Chicago. There's a bit of a thing. There's a place out in Norwood Park that was built a year before in 1837, but that wasn't anywhere near Chicago at the time it was built. It was gradually absorbed. This place was about 2 blocks north of where it is now originally, but this was the home of Henry B. Clark, who was an insurance guy. No, a hardware guy, sorry. He is said to have copied the design for Mayor William B. Ogden's house that was up on the north side. I couldn't find a photo to confirm that. He built this place in 1839. 1849, he contracted the cholera. Everybody was getting cholera in 1849. It was what you did. It was what all the cool kids were doing. And most of them were being buried in a mass grave over at the Old City Cemetery. And he lived long enough after catching the cholera to say, if I die, don't put me in one of those pits up in the Old City Cemetery where the wind's just going to blow the bodies right back up anyway. Just bury me here on the property. And he did. He was buried about 2 blocks north of here. And for many years, people walking by would say, oh, there's old man Clark's grave. But then in 1864, his widow died. And she was buried at Graceland Cemetery. Sometime around that time, he was moved over there himself. He's got a grave at Graceland now. Now, after the Great Chicago Fire, the house was moved clear down to the south side in 1872. It was in Hyde Park for a long time. Then in 1977, when they were trying to revitalize Prairie Avenue at a time when most of the old mansions had been torn down, the ones that were still standing were being sold for $100,000 and full of gang graffiti. They were in an effort to try to revitalize the area, so they moved the Clark House back to here, back to pretty close to its original location. So there it is, having been broken apart on a flatbed truck. The reason they had to break it apart and some of the tricks they had to do was how are they going to get it over bridges and across the L tracks. So here's how they did it. They had to take it apart and raise up a bunch of platforms to build it up over the L tracks. Must have been quite a sight to see. Let's take a look just beyond that over to the side. There's a whole block of mansions that are missing from right here. Like right about where this actually properly stands now, we can see some of them down this block. It's not a very good view, but this is what it would have looked like here. We can also see a bird's eye view of the block here. It only helps us so much. But 1834, right about here, was the home of Fernando Jones, who declared himself to be the Dean of Chicago Pioneers. He was the founder of the Chicago Title and Trust, killed him a wolf when he was only 15, right on the corner of like Dearborn and Madison. This is a story that he told over and over and over again. This is a newspaper article saying Fernando Jones is Chicago incarnate. A couple of different interesting cartoons around here. One just to the left of him shows him killing the wolf, which is a story, again, that he told over and over again. To the left of that, as a walker, Weston's a mere child. There was this walker, a famous pedestrian named Walker. It was kind of like, you know, that scene in Forrest Gump where he's running across the country and becomes famous? It's kind of like that, only he was walking. Walked through Chicago a few times. He was one of the most famous men in the country at the time. And then up on the right, his story, he told a lot of stories about the Potawatomi being terrified of Halley's Comet until he set them straight. Once again, it's hard to know exactly how seriously to take these guys' stories, how many of his stories were for real, how many of them were just old man stories. Like there was this famous painting of Chicago back in the early, around the time of the Battle of Fort Dearborn, or up to about 1830. He liked to claim that he was the guy in the canoe. That doesn't look like him to me. But he was a friend of David Kennison, the guy who claimed to be the last survivor of the Boston Tea Party. He was actually the one who got a jar of old tea leaves that he said were from Boston from him. Which the fact that Fernando Jones is attached to it does not make it particularly more reliable a story to me. But then he decided to go to Europe for a while and rented out his house to Wilbur F. Story of the Chicago Times. Now, Wilbur F. Story had run the Chicago Times as the anti-Lincoln paper in Chicago about a decade before, used it as a shameless vehicle for white supremacy. And not even like, by modern standards, I mean by the standards of the day. This guy built his career entirely on racism and bigotry. Here he is with News from White Manville. Or abolitionism and intolerance, abolitionism immeasurably growing worse and worse. So, in the 1870s, the guy lost what marbles he had and started building this massive mansion down on the south side that was being dictated by all of the voices in his head, and there were a number of voices in his head by then. So, while Mr. Jones went overseas, Wilbur F. Story rented out his house, and then when Mr. Jones came back, Wilbur F. Story refused to leave. He had letters written out talking about how bad the place smelled and said that was probably because of Mr. Jones. Wouldn't give it back, and eventually, you know what happened to him? He died here. That's my favorite part of any story about Wilbur F. Story, the part where he dies. I've promised Rose Hill Cemetery I will stop dancing on his grave, but you know what? I lied. And we'll go down the block from here just a little bit. Just to the left of that would have been the Edson Keith house. No, I'm sorry, that was further down. Yeah, the dancing GIF is another one that's not coming up right now. There's this thing, Dropbox isn't working with offline files right now in the new build of Mac. Yeah, Mr. Jones and me hang around with Kennison, and we kill all the wolves on Dearborn. I'm stabbing it too. All right, this is my favorite one of them all. This looks like something out of Scooby-Doo. The Keith House, 1900 South Prairie Avenue. Just to the left of this would have been 1906, his brother's house. And that one that I showed by Henry Ives Cobb down the block was his brother Osborne's place. It's a picture of about what this area looked like at the time. I was also in the middle of this would have been Robert Allerton's place. But this is Mr. Elbridge Keith, who looked more like a mouse than most human beings did. And over to the right, their brother Osborne lived in the house that looked like this one. And just to the left of it, at 1906 South Prairie, would have been their brother Edson's house. So Edson, Elbridge, and Osborne Keith. It's like real Music Man kind of names. Those are the kind of kids who like were hanging out with Zunita Shin. There's a picture of how it would have looked back when it was a little bit more crowded. That's Fernando Jones's house over on the right, Edson Keith's house on the left. In the center, Elbridge Keith. Eventually, Edson walked out of the front door of the place. These three brothers got very rich running a hat and fur company, but something kind of went wrong. Edson Keith had something go wrong with his head or with his finances. Nobody was really sure what was going through his mind that night, but one night he just walked out of the place and off into the lake a block away. The next day, his coat was found over by the shore. And eventually, it was determined that he had walked into the lake deliberately. His body was found a couple of days later. Now, this is the thing, in articles like this, they always say, well, he must have had financial reverses. He must have been sick or something. They eventually ruled temporary insanity because they were unable to find anything about his health, anything about his finances. Just ruling temporary insanity was easier for people to swallow than the notion that being rich didn't solve all of his problems. Mental health doesn't care who you are. When the coroner's jury examined the body, among those on the jury were Fernando Jones. We'll loop around from here. All right, so this is a piece of, it's said to have been a piece of an old church that was actually recently wrecked by a driver driving over it. So at least we've got it preserved in the picture here. But back behind where it would be was the home of Marshall Field. Marshall Field himself, here's a pretty good picture of it. Marshall himself, who bought his way into owning the biggest department store in town, most of the big innovations that it came up with, like having an open return policy, having big window displays, having the perfume counter right in the door so he had to cover up the smell of the horse poop outside, these were mostly innovations by his predecessor, Potter Palmer, or by Harry Selfridge, who was his main general manager for many years. Marshall himself was a distinctly unlikable, boring human being that nobody could exactly stand. Even his wife, Nanny Field, is generally said not to have been bothered one bit when he started seeing the woman who lived back behind them behind her back. Everybody knew all about it. Nobody really seemed to mind. However, as much of a reputation as he has as a bore, he did throw one of the most famous parties of all time. When his son Marshall Field Jr. turned 17, they threw what was known as the Mikado Ball for the young people. This is a picture of three girls. That is Alice Keith, one of the Keith brothers' daughter, over on the left. All the neighborhood children dressed up as though they were in Japan, based on the Mikado by Gilbert and Sullivan, which was the big popular show at the time. It was kind of like people having a Hamilton ball today, except that it cost an absolute fortune. I mean, Grace Murray Meeker was there, Catherine Dexter McCormick was there. Grace, in particular, was still telling stories about this party years and years later. It is often said the day to have cost something like $75,000. I think that's a 1950s figure that it was adjusting for inflation. At the time, they were saying, when it first happened, people were saying that it cost $15,000. Mrs. Field clarified that no, it was only $5,000, except for $2,000 spent on photographs. For all the $2,000 they spent on photos, though, this is about the only one I know of that actually survives of that ball. And also, you got to remember, like, this was cash. A lot of the people working at Marshall Fields were making about $2 to $5 a week. And his excuse was, well, if they just save 10 cents a week, that's thousands of dollars in a couple of years. If by a couple you mean about 250, sure, Marshall, I get it. Math is hard. This is Delia Marshall's second wife. And one other thing, around the time of the party, there was a mention of the big popular kind of party to have in Chicago for a while was hobby horse races, prompting the National Police Gazette to publish this image, the way they do it in Chicago. Yep, that's the way we do it in Chicago, all right. And we're going to move just a little ways down from that. Just a bit down is another Solon Spencer Beeman house. This enormous red brick one was Marshall Field Jr., Marshall's son, and his wife, Albertine Huck Field, daughter of John Huck the brewer, whose other two daughters married like countesses and baronesses. But this was the home of Marshall Field Jr., and the site of one of Chicago's most enduring mysteries. December 1905, Marshall Field Jr. was found shot in one of the drawing rooms. Now, he was lying there bleeding. They rushed him to the hospital, but didn't call an ambulance, didn't alert the authorities or anything. As the word spread that he was dying in the hospital and Marshall Field Sr. was summoned from the east, rumors started to go around the city that what really happened was that he hadn't accidentally shot himself, as the official story held. What happened was he had been off at the Everlay Club, the fanciest brothel in town, which was located right where these Bertrand Goldberg buildings are now, and got in a fight with the bouncer, who shot him, then brought him back home to spare him the embarrassment of having been shot in a brothel. Now, it was very close by to this. The Levy District was right near the Millionaire District, which is convenient. So we'll see, here's a time lapse of how long the walk would have been. You just take a turn down Cullerton, walk down the block a little ways, cross over Michigan Avenue, cross over Wabash, and the old Presbyterian Church, the Second Presbyterian. Underneath the L tracks, And there you are at the site of the Everlay Club, which on the day that I filmed this, just happened to have on the ground in front of me a pair of underpants. Quite appropriate in a way. Now, Marshall Field made it known that if anybody said that anything untoward had happened here, he would pull all of his advertising from the paper, which was a pretty big threat because they were a really big advertiser. One of Harry Selfridge's big innovations was to advertise. But the Chicago Evening American already didn't get his advertising, so they published all kinds of stuff. They published like an analysis of the gun that had been used, saying that it couldn't possibly have been accidentally fired. Well, we'll see about that. But all of a sudden now his sons, after he died, and then Marshall himself died just weeks later, all of a sudden his kids were about the most interesting people in the world. Marshall III was suddenly the heir to an enormous fortune. Now, Henry was 10 at the time. He went on to a life of scandal himself. He had a trust for 40% of the Field fortune, grew up mostly in London, impregnated a Palace Theater Follies girl named Peggy Marsh, moved back to Chicago, said he'd send for Peggy, then married somebody else. He paid Peggy off the day of the wedding in 1917, then died weeks later after an infection from getting his tonsils removed before going off to fight in World War I. Support for the baby Henry Field Marsh, was stopped at once. Peggy took up with a guy who turned out to be a German spy. It's one of the wildest sagas in Chicago. Went to court and eventually got a $100,000 payout from the Field family, but then just vanished into history completely. Marshall III went off to serve in World War I. After that, he lived the Great Gatsby lifestyle for a while in Long Island while working as an investment banker, then started buying up newspapers. Eventually, his grandchildren sold off the newspapers to go make movies. Ted Field's first was Revenge of the Nerds. He's still making movies, too. We'll just move down over from here. Over to a few on Cullerton, just off to the side. These three. On the left is 2013. The right is 2013. 2013 was owned at the time by Fred Morelli, who took over for Hinky Dink Kenna as the first ward committeeman in 1944. He owned the Chicago Coliseum and was also the head of the jukebox racket with Greasy Thumb Gusick. The jukebox racket was, there were jukeboxes all over the place, but if you wanted your record in there, you had to pay people off. Also, if you ran a bar, you could buy a jukebox from somebody other than Morelli's company, but would you really want to? Mike Royko wrote, Morelli was a protege of big vice operator who got into the jukebox business. The first ward was his juke territory. You didn't have to get a jukebox from Morelli if you didn't want to. Not at all. You could provide your customers with canary music instead. And this play occasionally got violent. There was even a killing of 3 people that opened into a probe of the jukebox racket. The one in the middle there, the smaller one, I've got less data on. All I could really find was some story about a guy being arrested for leading a youth astray, which could mean any number of things, none of them savory. But then the one on the left was at one point the home of May Gibson. Now, JJ and May Gibson, May moved in about 1905. She and her husband had been the official photographers of the World's Fair in 1893. Well, most of what they were doing was studio shots and people's photo ID badges. So one of the innovations of the fair was having photo IDs of the people. But they took pictures like pictures of the Egyptian delegation. Now, her husband died not long after that. But May got herself involved in this big, complicated love triangle. She was seeing a guy that was officially, she was meeting with him for business, but then his wife sued for alienation, saying that she was being ditched. After they got divorced, she won $3,500. May said, no, it was just business when I saw him. That was all. But then he didn't marry her, so she arranged to sue him for breach of contract, breach of promise, the kind of thing you never hear of anymore. He had moved in with them, but tore up all the promissory notes, didn't ever give her the money that he was supposed to. Now, she later founded the Association of 93ers, veterans of the World's Fair, who would meet up to have reunions. She was still talking about how great the place was for years and years. At one point, the place was known as the Old Badger Mansion. Now, let's move around over here. we'll pass over this 1920s building. In the 1920s, when these mansions were out of style, they started building things like this factory. Well, this was a printing house. And just to cross over here, we've got this this one with the weird-looking arch up at the top, the yellowy one. This is the William Henry Reed House. William Henry Reed was a businessman, wrote a whole autobiography, Recollections of a Busy Life. But it doesn't really sound like a busy life. This is almost the most boring autobiography I have ever read. Really, he just accounts all of the news events of the year, like 1861, the Civil War began. Never talks about his own connection to them or his own reaction to them. He just lists off all of the events. It's like we didn't start the fire without a catchy chorus. He did mention that he was named William Henry after William Henry Harrison on the day that his parents got the news that he had won the election, but that is the most interesting part. Later formed a partnership with Peter Van Schack's drugstore supply business, but was out of that business before H.H. Holmes came around to swindle them. So he got out of that. Like, the whole second half of the book is just his financial statements. It's a real snore. He believed in the virtues of patience, prudence, perseverance, persistence, and plotting. Mostly plotting. It's a really plotting kind of book. So we'll not concern ourselves with him any further. And go next door to the Harriet Reese House by Henry Ives Cobb. Originally located a little bit different a spot from here. It was moved to this spot fairly recently. In 1892, it was in fact occupied by Edson, by Catherine Keith and her husband, Mr. Adler. Adler was an architect, built things like the club at the top of the field building. She was a writer herself. She wrote one novel about Chicago and one that was kind of a historical one. But then she died in a car accident abroad. Now, the Reese House had a lot of things in it over the years. It was a cafe at one point. So you used to be able to go into this place anytime you wanted to. And in 2014, it was relocated from a couple of blocks south. And prior to this, about where it stood, there was a house that looked about like this. I could only really find it from the side, but it was originally the home of H.O. Stone. This pioneer mortgage broker. Advertisements for the company in the 20th century always had him wearing the coonskin cap and everything. He is fairly well known around Chicago, mainly for building a statue of his wife, Frances Pierstone, at Rose Hill. It's the one under the glass case. When he met her, he had gone back to his hometown in New York. He was in his early 40s. She was 16. She died of tuberculosis shortly thereafter, so he went back to New York and married himself another 16-year-old. He got older and older. His wife stayed the same age. But then he died, and his wife, the second Mrs. H.O. Stone, Elizabeth Yeager Stone, outlived him by 36 years. And she was remembered by Arthur Meeker Jr. as the blandest woman in the neighborhood. She believed in perfect harmony, wouldn't hear an unpleasant word about anybody, but did once throw a party for Oscar Wilde that was attended by Marshall Field. So you've got two people who are kind of famous for being dull, throwing a party for Oscar Wilde. All I've really found as accounts of what it was like is he gave a little talk about words that were different in England and America, about the safest possible topic imaginable. It must have been just such an awkward party. I'm a little over time here, so we'll go a little bit further down Prairie. We'll cross over to where the new Wintrust basketball arena is now. Also a surprisingly good concert venue. There was at one point a skating pond here where all the kids would play. And then across the street was a photography studio occupied by a guy by the name of Commodore Steffens. We'll just show a few of his pictures to wrap things up. Here's one of his portrait of Mrs. Palmer. Generally, it was said that none of these people would ever go south of 22nd Street, which is now Cermak. It was just considered beneath their dignity to go that far south. But they did make exceptions, like to cross the street to go to Commodore Stephen's portrait studio. This is Bertha Palmer. This is one of an unknown person, but I think it's an absolutely fantastic photo. There's the look that he captured on her face. The look in her eyes is absolutely haunting there. And this was probably the last photograph taken of Marshall Field. That was one of his as well. But all right, everybody, we're a little bit over the time I usually like to go to on here. So, Sunday morning, I just decided last second, in about a week and a half, I'm supposed to fly to LA to do some talking headshots for a new Al Capone show that's going to be on Netflix. So I've been rereading some Capone stuff. It's a good time for me to be doing a Gangs of Chicago one. So Sunday morning, it's a little bit late to add one of these, so we'll just do Gangs of Chicago. Next Thursday, a week from tonight, I will be on the road with a school group. Will I be able to do a tour? I don't even know. So if we do, it'll be a surprise. We'll find out. You'll find out when I do. Next week at 8 p.m., live from New Jersey, where the group is going to be staying. So, all right, everybody, should you need Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, t-shirt, hoodie, etc., getting all set for Mystericon 2022 this fall, go to cafepress.com/MysteriousChicago. While I'm mentioning the con, for anybody new who might be out there tonight, there is a group on Facebook called Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club, where all of the regulars who come to these things all the time hang out. Highly recommend to everybody. It's a great group. Everybody's friendly. We all know how these groups can descend into drama and ugliness pretty quickly. They've managed to keep that from happening here, as better than any other group I have ever seen. Very proud of you guys. And with that, everybody, I will just put the Benny Goodman back on, and we will just hang out. Man, I am tired tonight. I don't know why, but here's Benny. He'll wake me back up. All right. Thanks, everybody. You are the cool kid, Susan. I'm going to dress down a little bit here. I got another layer on. I'm spooky. All year round. What if you sent me this? The weather, Kendra, that could be it. The name of the Facebook page is Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club. Miles is the cat. It was around here someplace. Right now we just got Priya back on the couch, taking a bath. Well, Molly, I'm taking a school group around New York next week, but the groups almost always stay in New Jersey. The hotels there are just an awful lot cheaper. Priya is quite a bit more extroverted than she was a year ago, or 8-9 months ago when we got her. She's busy taking a bath right now. She still doesn't love being held and carried. But she's gotten a lot more cuddly. She's a lot better with other people coming in. She didn't freak out too much when my sister and her kid were here last week. Thank you, Ann. If Priya were done, I'd bring her over. I had Miles here all at the beginning. But now he's moved on to other stuff, I guess. Elaine, no, I don't think I've met Neil Gale. If he's going around perpetuating H.H. Holmes myths, he's probably avoiding me. Somebody just asked me, I posted on TikTok a video of myself singing You Got Trouble on the old-timey street of the Museum of Science and Industry, and somebody asked me if I'd heard that H.H. Holmes haunts that replica street, and I know exactly who made that story up. Not gonna name names.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rag, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular
Forever
Goodman
Mysterians. I like that.
Millions.
But stay forever patrons, too. But I gotta be a little bit mercenary here and there. Because I did the taxes, and oh yeah, we owe money. I mean, we always do. Us being freelancers and all. Oh, I think this year is the most we've ever owed. No, we've done worse than this. Hey, Patricia. Hey, once I hit stop on this, a few minutes later, the whole thing will be up on the videos page of the Facebook group. Lee, we're mostly hitting the usual stuff. It's a pretty relaxed schedule, really, but they got a tour of the, one of the museums. Either Rockefeller Center or Radio City, I forget which. Julie, you mean Rose Hill, the cemetery? About 8-9 miles, I'd say. Mom, yeah, they're seeing Dear Evan Hansen. The Rockefeller Center tour is pretty cool. You get to meet a Rockette. I think I got a picture of myself with a Rockette in here, in fact. Yeah. I got the most random stuff in this drawer, but yeah, here's me with a Rockette, and also some random dad from the group. And we'll cover him up. Initially, I thought, wow, I bet that is every Rockette's least favorite duty. No, they fight for those shifts. They are well paid for them. Bob, Rose Hill walking tour is probably pretty soon. It's a pretty cool tour, but they really kind of rush you through it. I think they're trying to cram as many tours a day in as possible. They got a rough job. They have to re-audition for their spots every year. Oh, here's Miles. Miles has come to say hi. Everybody's trucking. Leah, that's awesome. I'm still bitter about the fact that I was filing tax returns and paying taxes when I was 14 but couldn't vote. I'd been paying taxes for two years by the time I didn't have the chance to vote against Bob Dole. Come here, Miles. You're gonna help me find my Flonase in a minute, right? Once we log off here. Here's the buddy. Ah, okay, watch out. Don't want to be held quite like that. Okay, I get it.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Sure. Show him your butt. I don't think I've had a refund since I was like 20. What did I really say when you thought I said Floby? Kind of want to know. So glad I got my hair cut. I look so much better, I gotta say. When the sides get puffy, it makes my whole face look puffy. Gary, it would be quite a hike to get clear out to Damon from there. Oh, Flonase, okay. Yeah, my barber recommended I try this sea salt spray, and I'm digging it. I'd gone through about a month where I didn't feel like I had one good hair day. Can I write off my parking tickets and towing fees? Questionable. I mean, I can write off a lot of stuff. Don't get me wrong, I write off a lot of stuff. Yeah, Elaine, I know it's a false high, but I'd take it. It just means the government's been holding your money for you. Good night, Laura. I don't need an extension. I'm all done. Right now, I'm just kind of hanging out to, Right now, I'm just kind of hanging out, wondering if I'll think of another thing I could deduct. I did realize I had messed up the home office deduction. Once I fixed that, that was a lot better. South Side. Yeah, there's a lot of old, that sounds a lot like Bronzeville and Hyde Park. That general vicinity. Oh, Miles is on the payroll. He gets paid in squeezy treats. Those little cat go-gurt things. Beverly, yep, do my own taxes. I'm pretty good at it. Mike, you know that's true. That is a good question. Could I write off Miles' expenses? Since he is the star of the show, and the logo. No, I know I can't claim them as dependents. I used to know a guy who claimed all of his snakes as dependents. I also knew a guy when I was driving for Papa John's Pizza, one of the other drivers, this older guy who said, I never pay taxes, I just write exempt. It's like, who told you that would get you out of it? And then he went into some line about the international bankers. I'm like, I know who you mean when you're talking about the international bankers. Come on.
And we'll let the title speak for itself. Benny Goodman presenting Madhouse.
Kathy, yeah, I am oddly sleepy today. Hey, Katie, glad you could drop in for a minute. Good night, Nedra, darling. Good night, Natalie. Oh yeah, it's Find a Grave Friday. That's find where I'm going. You know, we talked earlier today for the morning mini tour. I went to Richard Bellinger's house that survived the Great Chicago Fire. Put up a tweet thread on it. There'll be a TikTok tomorrow. But I can't find out where he's buried. I know I was able to mark exempt in college for a bit. I still had to pay some taxes. Like in my high school jobs and stuff. I don't remember the details. Good night, Darlene on YouTube. People keep having tomorrow off. What's tomorrow? Oh, right, Easter over the weekend. The Christian Passover. Thanks, Katie. I knew this haircut was working. If I position myself just right like this, it even looks like there's a nice little loop there. Cool. Thanks, Jackie. Have a good night. See you, Lisa. Oh, Good Friday. Okay. Kathy, that's how I've been doing synagogue, too. But doing East Coast synagogue, I'm done in time for whiskey and a cookie on Friday night. And Megan, there's this Twitter feed I've been following, Jew Who Has It All, who, the whole thing is like explaining Christian holidays as though we were living in a world where most people were Jewish, there were maybe a couple of Christians in town. I'm trying to explain the Cracker Barrel. It's great for our local Traith community. A cracker is a kind of matzo. They serve this kugel known as mac and cheese. There's a little gift shop where they sell their ethnic rusticana. And old people like going there on Sundays after Christian shul.
And here's a short encore portion of Benny Goodman's forthright invitation at the beginning of his program. Let's dance.
Well, no, Jenny, the person would rise from the grave on the third day, so not on Friday. I don't know, I've always had a good meal when I go to Cracker Barrel. Egg hunt in the cemetery, I can get behind that. I know there are churches that do, like, dawn services in the cemetery. Down south. It's a Southern Baptist thing, I think. Kendra, I'll be eating a lot of meat this week for Passover. It's kind of the end of the debate about which is the best kind of pizza in New York or Chicago. It's the best pizza is the first slice you eat after Passover. It's not close. It doesn't matter which kind it is. It can be like a frozen Tostino's party pizza. Wine and wieners, that's all right. That's fine by me. We'll rewind the Benny a bit. Octavio, as far as I know, we're still on for whiskey and a cookie. Well, you might have noticed last week I was at Wrigley Field and got some footage of the priest giving a mass for Wrigley Field employees for Palm Sunday. That was kind of cool. Yeah, but I always got to Google when it starts or what day the Seder is. I got all my supplies today. But I was thinking the Seder was on Saturday. No, it's tomorrow.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown.
Ah, Megan, that's a shame.
And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of The Bugle Call Rang.
If I get to New York and they still have that Brussels sprouts dish at a Lili, or a Lili's not there anymore or something, I'm going to be disappointed. So I've been, the whole pandemic, I've been, ever since the pandemic started, I have wanted that Brussels sprout dish at a Lili and the papaya juice at Papaya King or Gray's Papaya, either one, because that stuff you can't find it here. It doesn't travel well. I'm going to be making up for it this week. Oh, I assure you, I'll be making up for it this week. Very nearly, you can order from Gray's Papaya, but they were always out of stuff and it costs a lot, and I almost did it anyway. Carol, it depends on how long of a Haggadah you use. I mean, I've got a 5-minute Haggadah. You can do it pretty quick, or you can drag it out all day. What am I doing for Netflix? I've just been watching the last season of Better Call Saul to get you ready for the new one. I just found out the new season of Dairy Girls has started in the UK. I've managed to acquire episode 1 through the usual channels. Haven't watched it yet, but I'm very excited to. Oh, what am I doing for Netflix? Yeah, it's an episode of a series that's going to be about Al Capone. I probably shouldn't say too much about it. I just know I got to go talk Capone stuff. That'll be right after I get back from New York. I got to fly out to LA. We're still working on the details there. In fact, I should really check, see if they emailed while I was... Nope, they did not email with flight options. But I'll keep you posted. It'll probably be a long time before it's actually on the air. I mean, there's also an Al Capone episode of I Was There that should be airing pretty soon that I was a talking head for. I just mentioned that to the Netflix people, so maybe that's why they haven't given me flight info yet. I will definitely mention the underpants. But you gotta say underpants. Underpants is at least 50% funnier than underwear. I don't know if Dairy Girls is airing anywhere here yet, but it's airing in the UK. So it's available through the usual channels. Good night, Susan. Well, all right, everybody. I am rather sleepy tonight, so I'm going to be checking out. I'm checking out Goomba, as Duke Ellington would say. So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining me. A quick plug for the upcoming stuff. There's not too much to plug right now because I'm in my busy touring season. But Sunday morning, we'll fire off a quick Gangs of Chicago as I work on going through all of my Capone stuff anyway. Then, next Thursday, I will be in New Jersey next Thursday night. I should have made it to Jersey by 9 o'clock. Might have arranged all of the check-in and stuff. Might be in my hotel room by then. In which case, I will log on and, assuming the Wi-Fi is sufficient, I will try to broadcast something. Otherwise, maybe I'll just walk around and show you a little bit of scenic New Jersey. You can blow up the Chicken Man and, no, that's in Philly. We can get sprung from our cages on Highway 9. But all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Have a great night. Stay strong, stay awake. And everybody stay spooky. I'll see you tomorrow morning for Find a Grave Friday. Thanks, everybody.